Welcome back to Tarzan Takes. Joining me tonight are two captains of the industry. When I was being groomed from a Kumasi bush boy to a Karachi, we had to do a lot of things called plays. And one of the ones I remember most was a British light opera called The Gondoliers. And the key character in that was called the Duke of Plaza Toro. And his claim to fame was that he led his regiment from behind. And in these tariff discussions, we had a lot of leading from behind. But tonight, we have the generals themselves coming up for our discussion. My first guest is Kweku Awotwe, Chief Executive of the Volta River Authority. He sat in the seat immediately I left, went away, and he's come back to sit in it again. So he must know everything about it. And before that, when I used to sit in the seat, Kweku was one of my most vociferous opponents about all the waste that could be saved from VRA. Thirdly, we are family, but we won't discuss that at the moment. My second guest is Dr. Ofosu Ahenkra, who is also family. He was the last person I engaged before I left the National Energy Board in 1991 too. So I'm glad that today he's the Executive Secretary of the Energy Commission. So we're going to have a family chat, but a family chat that will hopefully inform the discussion on tariffs. Let's start off with you, Kweku. If the power is not there, we can't talk about quality of service. So let's start off with, assuming there was an increase in tariff today, could you deliver the power that is needed? And if not, what will it take?
Charles, I think that's a great question to start. And the answer is no, you couldn't. And you couldn't for the simple reason that we don't have enough capacity in the system to deliver that power. As you know, the West African gas pipeline is still not delivering gas. Yep. And until that happens, we won't have enough reserve in the system to allow us to provide enough power for everybody today. What the utility providers are really saying about the tariff is really in two parts. When you think of any business, whether that business is supplying electricity, whether that business is a hair salon, cutting people's hair, you need investment capital and you need the operation or provision of that service. What we're saying is that the tariff must reflect both of those things.
We'll get there, but I want to press on with this issue of the supply, because it's the same old chicken and egg argument. I started off my take by talking about if you think electricity is expensive, try candle. And anybody who's had to use alternatives knows that it's far more expensive. Sure. But as we go into this discussion, what can we deliver? I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about crude oil procurement, for example. There's been a lot of discussion about buoy. So as we sit, today I've had my lights off. What can we deliver to the consumer today?
Sure. I mean, two things will happen when we have a tariff increase. The first is that VRA will be able to cover its costs. Today, we're buying $90 million of crude oil every month. The tariff covers about half of that, and so government has to step in. A good tariff will mean that we can cover our costs. When we don't cover our costs, it means we put off maintenance, it means we put off important projects, and so while the impact may not be felt today, it slowly weakens the business. Now, for ECG and Gridco, who don't have such high operating costs, they still have to do maintenance. They still have to pay people. And so what the tariff ought to do is allow them to run that business effectively.
Okay, talking about tariff, and you are playing a good captain's game because you keep bringing the discussion back to tariff. I want us to also talk about the issue of the supply. even if you got a tariff increase today, strictly speaking, it will take 3 months for the cash flows to start coming in. You know.
Yeah.
So, from the point of view of satisfying the quality of service argument, you don't want to be caught by the consumer saying 2 months down the line, well, you got your tariff increase and nothing is happening. What can be done to make sure that we have a situation where there can be qualitative improvements the day tariffs are announced? I mean, if the West Africa gas pipeline came along today, would that be possible?
I think a couple of things. I mean, we all know that the West African gas pipeline, once it resumes, means that the Asogli plant will start again, and that'll add 200 megawatts to the system. We know that. So that's an immediate improvement to the system if gas. Not the tariff, but gas yeah. resumes. You're right. I mean, it'll take me 3 months before I actually see the impact of that. But what it will allow us to do is start planning for the ongoing improvements that do need to be done. And I suspect ECG and GUIDCO would say the same.
Mr. Executive Secretary, I've been researching all your stuff. What lien do you have on VRA? I can see you have a lot of lien on the distributor, but what lien do you have on the supplier? Presumably, even though your organization came after VRA, you're still the licensor in a technical sort of sense. Do you have any control on VRA's?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay.
We license all facilities, all generation facilities in the country, with the exception of Akosombo and Pong, which are exempted by law. But every other facility is licensed by the Commission. In licensing, we look out for certain parameters.
Why are Akosombo and Pong exempted? Because those are effectively our largest producers of power in this country.
Well, the framers of the law thought that they should be exempted. Elsewhere, where hydro facilities are exempted, the process is quite complicated. It involves a lot of money. Perhaps, I wouldn't know. I don't know exactly.
Is Bui exempted?
Bui is not.
So why?
The law exempted Akosombo and Pong. So Bui actually has a license. They have applied for a license. We processed their license, and the license has been approved. So Bui effectively is
okay. So moving on from Bui, Kweku has got TAPCO. He's got
He's got TAPCO. He's got
T2. You've got T3.
Plants, yeah.
You've got plants in Tema. What are you doing to make sure that he's doing well?
They are all licensed, except one, which we have to agree with them what to do with it, because the issue is ownership
of that particular
plant. Government bought that plant, and we don't have any formal documentation to show that government has handed it over to VRA. So when that is done, we will license the plant.
But who is producing from that plant?
So far, it's not producing.
It's not producing, so it's not in operation.
It's not.
But the plants that are actually in operation now,
all of them are licensed.
TAPCO
is licensed.
I heard that T3 blew recently.
A unit
blew.
A unit had a problem. Yeah.
Do they have to report to you on quality of operation?
They have to.
What kind of things do they have to do?
They report on the operation parameters, heat rate. They gave us that information before it was licensed. So occasionally they have to come back to us and report on that, emission levels, how much electricity has been generated from the plant. Actually, we get that information daily without asking VRA. So we have.
But what sanctions would you put on them if they don't perform?
Really, the sanctions are more of economic than like a stick or anything else, because we are gradually moving into the market market state, where the performance of a generator will reflect in the cost of electricity generated. And therefore, if they falter in their operations, they lose revenue. They will not be dispatched. Again, if you are not dispatched and somebody else dispatches in your place to supply your contract, you have to pay that person. So it is more of economic regulation in the marketplace than any other legal or any other sanction.
Okay.
But currently we do not have the market because we have shortages. So we work in the background with PURC to determine what capacity rates and other rates that they could charge. We know the cost of the machines. We know the lifespan of the machine because we gave the license. We are giving it a lifespan.
But no, you see,
so
okay, that's a lot of stuff. But what I really want to know from this discussion, I think we want to get out of this discussion, and I am not putting a lot of things on the issue of whether tariffs should be given or not. I think you can sense from my opening statement that I think that that argument is not really arguable. But at the moment, for example, there seems to be quite a lot of challenges with the thermal production. Is your discussion and your case for tariff so that you can keep going in the future or claw back some losses? Because in the beginning of the discussion, there was a lot of talk about government owing, bills not being collected. Does the government owe you? If it's having to pay for your crude oil, does it owe you? Kwegu.
Government has owed us. I mean, at the beginning of the year, they owed us over 200 million cedis. We've been able to collect 170 million of that.
170?
Over the last 4 or 5 months. So we've collected some of that money back. That's
in cash or in crude oil payments?
Oh, in cash.
In cash, okay.
In cash, yes. They've also supported us with crude oil payments because...
So now you owe government?
No, we don't owe government.
But if you are paying for your crude oil, you must owe them.
Well, actually, what we did, what we've done in the last month is we did a reconciliation exercise.
Cross-debt?
Not just cross-debt, but, what government has supported us over the years. We did a 5-year exercise and what the tariff has been. And the exercise with the Ministry of Finance showed that actually government should give us some money.
Okay. Moving forward. So the kind of numbers you are asking for, are they justifiable and realistic?
I can speak most authoritatively for VRA. I cannot.
No, yes, for VRA. I don't want you to talk for anybody else.
Right.
Because I invited the MD of ECG and I can't explain why he's not here. But you talk for yourself.
So today, VRA's tariff, the wholesale tariff that we give, that we charge to ECG is 8.4 pesos, which is about 4.2 cents,
yes.
roughly. Just on crude oil purchases alone, last year I purchased over 1.1 billion. This year I'll purchase 1.5 billion cedis worth of crude oil. Just on crude oil alone, my tariff should be 14 pesos. Just without paying for maintenance, without paying for repairs.
And this is an assumption of running crude oil alone without... what would happen if gas came in? But of course, you have a problem with your gas. You have to give it away to other people.
You could call it a problem. You could call it...
It is a problem in the sense that you cannot run VRA's thermal plants with the gas, even though you are the customer.
We run most of the gas. We run most of the gas through, the VRA plants. You're right. 35 million cubic feet does go to Asogli, which is about a third of what we've been getting. But, today, given all the plants that have been built, the country actually needs a lot more gas than it's available, never mind whether it's coming from Nigeria or Ghana. So I think that's just a challenge that we have going forward. But the point is, last year we procured 12 cargoes of crude. This year, whether we have gas or not, we'll procure about the same. And interestingly, as we look out into the future, we expect to procure similar quantities of crude because we're running our hydro level plants at such high levels. They're not sustainable. And so over the next couple of years, we're going to slowly ramp them down and run more thermal plants in exchange. So what you actually find is that the hydrothermal mix is going to rapidly go to 50-50 and use a lot more crude in the process.
When I went to VRA, one of the things I never understood is the magical rate of return on recalibrated fixed assets, or whatever they called it. I found it very strange because here was VRA trying to behave like a private utility, in the sense that you got to put money away for a future day for reinvestment. But the reality was that every major investment was being paid for by government. Is it justifiable to use the rate of return argument in a situation where government is paying? VRA didn't put a peso into Bui. Most of the money government took for the when the Eurobonds went into the power sector for new plants. Is it justifiable for VRA to be sitting behaving like a private sector organization and doing calculations on rate of return when we know that they're not going to plow the money back into new capacity?
You know, it's not really true that VRA doesn't pay for the plants that it builds. We paid for Akosombo fully. We paid for Pong fully. We paid for those debts we are paying off as we speak. We paid for Takrady 1, TAPCO, $400 million. It's true, we haven't paid for the last 3 plants, T2, T3, and the KTPP that Doc was talking about. But if you look at our book, we've actually paid off over the years quite a sizable amount for the capital projects we have run.
I don't want to reveal a fabulous secret, but the dam is paid for, but it still tends to form part of the ROR calculation.
But you see, we started our first retrofit in the mid-90s, and we restarted from about 2002, 03. We spent over $100 million retrofitting those 6 turbines. That's real money that we spent. That has to be paid off. We're about to start the Pong retrofit. We've started the contractual arrangements. That's 50 million euro, almost $80 million that we have to pay for. If we're successful, those plants will run for another 30 years. So someone has to pay for it, and I think that is really the basis of the rate of return.
But can we discern between the specifics you have to pay for and an assumption of having to pay for everything? Because it's an important, in other jurisdictions where you find the state as a major investor or owner of the asset, they take a slightly different approach. I'm not saying that you shouldn't look for money to pay for the things that are important, but should you go for all, or maybe say the ABCD has to be paid for, and therefore we need to raise the money for it?
What we see PRC doing is that it puts a rate of return on the plants that have been put in service. So there's a rate of return on Akosombo Pong, as you said. There's a rate of return on the thermal plants, as you said. And I think that's in keeping. When an IPP comes, he puts a rate of return on that as well, because that investor has to make its money back. I mean, the point you're making is that not all the investments that have been made in the power sector have been made by the government.
No.
And I think that's an important point to make. You've got to recover those that have not been made by government.
All right, so let's now switch the conversation to what I think is the major worry. What is happening all around? You know, the discussion with PURC and the feedback from everything is consumers are saying, look, quality of service. In the past, and I remember when I was sitting in your seat, getting to a 200% increase in tariffs on the back of delivering good quality services to consumers. And not just me, others have done the same. And the consumer is always saying the promises have failed to be materialized into quality of service. What I found in the past was that the tariff announcements were not clear enough about quality of service. And in my research, I realized that you are the king of quality of service. You are the licensor. So can you tell us briefly a little about what quality of services, assuming Kweku has delivered the power, the ample power, what quality of services should consumers expect from the utilities, and how do they make sure that they get it, and what do they do when they don't get it? I'll start you off, and Kweku will chip in as we go along.
Okay, thank you very much. When you talk of quality of service, it's a whole mixture of a lot of services. You start from getting the supply to your premises. When you put in an application, over what time you are supposed to be connected, and when you are connected, the service that you are getting, that is the reliability of the supply. We have laws, actually 2 laws that govern the quality of service. The first one is the Electricity Supply Rules of Practice, which is LI 1816 and was passed in December 2005. This specifies the procedures for getting connection, the obligation of the supplier to supply you, the quality of the electricity itself, procedures for billing, metering, disconnection if you fail to pay, and all the parameters of electricity supply. Now, for example, if you apply for a service, the law requires that within 5 days, the utility has to come and conduct a survey of how much it will cost to supply you. If they give you a bill, that is a connection charge, and you pay, within 5 days, they have to connect you.
The reality is that it doesn't happen.
Right.
What does the consumer do?
The consumer has the option of making a complaint, and you complain to the PURC. If for every week that you are not connected after payment, there is a penalty, 2 penalty units that the utility has to pay to you if they don't connect you after 5 days. Of course, it differs from metropolitan areas, district capitals, and rural areas. But once you apply, they have a period to respond. If you pay, they have a period within which to give you a supply.
Do you have any records of, because the reality really is that me sitting here, I've applied for a new prepaid meter 2 months ago. It didn't happen. When I called the regional manager, he says, oh, I can't remember. I seem to have lost the application. That's me, the troublesome Tarzan.
That's a breach of the law.
But I'm saying that all kinds of consumers are facing this. I mean, this must be news to most consumers hearing this, that 5 days ECG must or net. You see, Kweku also presides over another part of the distribution thing called net. What can the consumer do in reality? And is PURC obliged to enforce this?
Yes, they are. In fact, if a consumer does not get a service within the stipulated time, the consumer should go to PURC and complain to PURC. And if it continues, for every week that it continues, the consumer is entitled to compensation.
Now, you know, because I want you to really explain these things to people and maybe publish them. For example, in your LI 1935, it talks about how many power outages, assuming again that the supply system is okay, how many power outages in a year that a consumer should put up with?
In a year, a consumer, I'm using the metropolitan areas as my example.
Yes.
In a year, a consumer can have a maximum of 6 outages, and with a total duration of 48 hours. So if it exceeds 48 hours in a year, then the consumer is entitled to a compensation, provided the outage was not caused as a result of a planned interruption for maintenance or a major fault, unforeseen, like
the whole system going down.
The whole system going down, a transformer exploding, those sort of major events, those ones are not counted. Or if there's going to be an interruption for maintenance, the consumer has to be notified at least 3 days before the event. And if it is an accident, the consumer has to be notified immediately after the event that we have a problem and that we are working to restore supply. So if any of this does not happen, that is a breach of the law, and the consumer deserves to be compensated.
One of the most critical things in your airlines, for example, is that power should be delivered to a certain voltage level.
That's correct.
Inevitably. And that one I can tell you that even if Kweku gets the full supply going, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because of the fact that so much development is going on, which is not catching up with the supply. If you go to your local beer bar, they'll tell you, Master, the beer is not cold because you have low current. They don't call it low voltage. They call it low current. And the issues of fluctuations are not going to go away. The issues of overvoltage. I have said that most of these fires are being caused by the overvoltages that come after the doomso. These problems are not going to go away. What are you going to do? I mean, what can the consumer expect? What provision does your airline provide?
The airline provides for voltage nominal, what we call the nominal
230 plus or minus
voltage,
10.
voltage level. You
Yes.
know, we are working with equipment, and the ideal is for the technical people, it's a sinusoidal sort of supply. But you don't get this happening, I mean, all the time. So we allow for some fluctuations.
10%.
We allow for 10% fluctuation. The nominal voltage is 230 volts. So it's plus or minus 30%. So the minimum you can get is 207 volts, and the maximum is 253 volts. Anything outside these parameters is not normal. And
what can they do?
Unfortunately, it's very difficult for the consumer to say that my voltage is 190 volts, because the consumer has no machine, no device to measure.
You see, if I have machines, in the business I do, I have machines, and we are measuring voltages in areas of Ajirigano and elsewhere of as low as 90 volts.
That is not acceptable.
But is the commission monitoring any of these things? Because I can tell you that you find very few places where people are getting voltages of anywhere around 180, even 190.
At the moment, we are monitoring these voltages at the transmission and some sub-transmission levels.
And I think that's a problem. You see,
because to be able to monitor voltages at distribution transformers, we need equipment installed on all the distribution transformers with remote data collection capabilities, that independent of the utility, we will get that data at a central point, and we'll be able to monitor.
Are you going to do that?
We are going to do that. It costs quite a lot of money, but we have that in our program to get the monitoring system installed. Apart from that, what we are going to do, in fact, we are going to launch this program within the next, in the second week of July. We are going to give all consumers the opportunity to report outages. You know, ECG or the utilities are supposed to give us indicators, what we call indicators such as system average interruption frequency index.
What does that mean to the
the man on the it just tells you it tells you how many times a consumer goes off in a period.
Let me just bring Kweku in there, because I'm not sure what the situation is. Well, at least you're still technically chairman of NEDCO, right?
Yes.
So what's the situation in NEDCO with the distribution? Are you facing similar challenges as ECG?
NEDCO faces very similar challenges to ECG. It's a much smaller population. It's about 400,000 people. It's about 10% of the country's requirement. But the performance of NEDCO is similar to the performance of ECG. We suffer the technical losses, the commercial losses, as well as the collection losses. And you know, we clearly need to have a plan.
But does that mean that in Ghana we really don't know how to distribute electricity? Because it seems to be that the generation and the transmission seem to be by and large reasonably okay. And if we are having challenges both from ECG and NEDCO, what seems to be the problem?
Our distribution losses are very high, at least speaking for NEDCO. As I said, they're similar to ECG. Technical and commercial losses are over 20%, which is high by world standards. And when you add collection, which is you know, not up to 100%, you're getting losses of 35, 40%, which is very high. You know, the World Bank, the Ministry of Energy put out a paper in 2011 showing these numbers. So there's clearly a need to really bring those losses down, because as you say, when the investment is made in the generation and transmission end, the distribution is like a leaky bucket. You're losing a lot of that. So there clearly has to be a priority on that.
So really, coming back to the tariff issue, if we're losing 30% of what is generated and sent to the distributors, is there a case, a meritorious case for saying that we should be increasing tariffs simply because we are running an inefficient system? And what does the licensors say about that?
Just let me, Koku has been very modest here. We have figures for losses. We collect them. And NEDCO is doing pretty better. Their losses for 2012 was about 20.5%, as against almost 25% for ECG. So NEDCO, they have systematically reduced their losses, but they can do better.
What is an acceptable loss standard for a well-performing utility? Maybe 5 to 10?
7.7%. I know that UK utilities are doing 7.7%.
But it goes back to the question I'm posing. Are we asking consumers to pay? You see, let me tell you why I'm asking this question. In South Africa, the tariff that Kweku will get as VRA, they use the municipality concept for distribution. And no municipality can get more than 12% over and above the bulk supply tariff rate. And if they do, they must go and make a case for it. Here we have our main distributor asking for 200% over Kweku's rate.
I think
and then throwing away a quarter of the electricity. And what is the licensor doing about that? Can you take their license away?
We can, but if we do that, they will switch off. I mean, they turn it off. Unless we.
Who will turn it off?
Well, the person you've taken, whose license you've taken, will turn it off, and you have to get a new operator to come and take over.
Well, that's what I mean by taking their license away.
It had been done before. It was done in Mexico, I think 2 years ago. They took the license from the utility, and they brought in new operators to do that. But the tariff, we are not responsible for tariff setting. But the structure is such that the energy component is passed through. So if VRA supplies at 9 cents or 9 pesos, the transmission is 2 pesos. Then the distribution, what we call the distribution service charge, it is what is actually paid to ECG to bring the power to your house.
I think I understand very well, but I'm saying that in Africa, the final charge is not more than 12% of what because in South Africa, the ESCOM is responsible for both generation and transmission. So whatever tariff is given to it, the municipalities cannot get more than 12% for distribution.
Charles, let me make a comment about that. I mean, I think we can learn a lot from South Africa. One of the things you learn about South Africa, and we've looked at the numbers ourselves, is that they make a lot more investment in the electricity sector than we do, whether it's one company or three.
Yeah.
In fact, we looked at some numbers over the last 5 years. They invested $26 billion in the electricity sector. And for every man, woman, and child, that works out to about $110 per person per year. Now, you look at Ghana, in the last 5 years, we spent maybe 2.3, 2.4 billion. Seems like a lot of money. For 24 million people, that's less than $20 per person per year. So
but you see, you are dealing with 50,000 megawatt
no.
capacity.
The point I'm making is that the performance requirements that we must put in place must mirror the investments that we make in the sector. If we're not making those investments, you cannot ask for those performance measures. The point I'm making is that they have consistently, even with their problems, invested 5, 6, 7 times more than we invest in the sector. So,
a much larger system, though.
well,
We have a peak load of less than 3,000. They have 50,000.
but I made a point. But I made a point that per person,
Yeah.
for those 50 million people, they're investing 5 times more than we do per person.
You know, Kweku, over the years, because I've been in this sector for 25 years, I don't know how much money we've pumped into ECG. An awful lot of money. And each time you pump that money into it, they say that this time we got it right. But it seems to get worse. I mean, that is a fact.
You know,
And that is what really brought me to ask the question as to whether we should get into rate of return arguments. Because any time a major investment has been needed in the distribution sector, it's government that has come up with the money.
I think what the PURC has done, in fact, they have benchmarks, and they give them a certain level of losses. The last time it was 21%. What it means is that they allow a certain, they pass through a certain level of losses.
Should it be the PURC or you who should be giving them those standards of performance?
It is PURC.
Why?
This is not a standard of performance. This is the rate of collection, which is outside of our purview. It is
the rate of collection of their
well, you can call it distribution losses, not technical, not technical, but market loss.
You know, in the commentary, we saw ECG virtually claiming that from 2010, you've given them essentially a holiday to sort out their system. You know, because it's important for us to know when these tariffs are announced, what quality of service consumers can expect to get from the distributor. And if they are claiming that they've been given a holiday, in effect, not to implement those standards set in 1935, etc., can you just...
No, I think the information is not correct. What actually happened is the LI 1816 was passed in 2005, in December 2005. And in that regulation, a transitional period of 5 years was given. So it starts from 2005 to 2010. So the transitional period is elapsed. What LI 1935, which is actually specifying the penalties, did is that it took the 1816 of 2005 into consideration and said that now you have all your 5 years. So from 2010, the penalties kick in. The 1935 was passed in 2008. So by that time, we had 2 years more to go.
So ECG has no parole from 1935?
Today, no. Today, actually from 2010, so if ECG does not meet the parameters, the compensation is due.
Whilst you're here, I want to ask a related question because it has a serious impact on the tariffs. And these are the power purchase agreements that ECG is signing with independent producers. They are very expensive. There's no way that the consumers of Ghana can be asked to pay those levels. They don't have the luxury or the benefit of Kweku's hydro mix. You are talking about over 40 to 48 pesos per kilowatt hour. And when you ask ECG, they say, but the Energy Commission has licensed these people. Is there some coordinated action in terms of ensuring that, if, for example, those tariffs, those IPPs were selling to independent people, let's say the mines, people who are able to buy, but these are now being fed into the national calculation of tariffs. And if you look at their submission, a very large percentage of this is coming from all these many IPP contracts, which presumably have been sanctioned by the Commission and PURC.
Strange enough, I don't know, Kweku is here, whether ECG has a formal power purchase agreement with VNRA.
Yeah, I know. Mm-hmm.
VNRA is the biggest supplier of electricity to ECG, and we expect them to have a power purchase agreement. We do not specify who to sell power to. We grant a license for the IPP to build a power plant and sell electricity in Ghana. The IPP has the option of selling to the big companies, and indeed we have licensed 30 companies, private, industry, mines, and those what have you, who have the option of either buying power from ECG or going direct to a generator and sealing a deal with them to supply them with power.
But the question I'm asking is that ECG has signed a lot of power purchase agreements, and those power purchase agreements are very expensive, and somehow these things want to be fed into the national grid. I don't see.
What we are saying is that we do not specify who to sell the power to.
You don't specify?
We don't specify. We give you the license.
Are you aware of the kind of tariffs the IPPs want to charge?
Yes, they lay a copy of their power purchase agreement with us, so we know.
You know? We
know.
And you know that they are far higher than Kweku's 8.4 pesos?
The problem is fuel, and that is the problem Ghana has. If we have cheap fuel, indeed, the power purchase agreement is nothing but a formula. Mm-hmm. And depending on what kind of fuel you put in there, you get a different rate. If they put in crude oil, the price of electricity is high. If they put in gas, which is cheaper, the price is
The reason why I'm raising
low.
this question, you can come in here now, because there must be an idea of how much power we need in Ghana for each year and what the mix of that power should be, so that in looking at tariff calculations, we can get a reasonable sense. But what I'm getting in all of this is that it's like the left hand doesn't know what the right is doing, and here is Kweku with 8.4 pesos or cents. Is it pesos? Against somebody with 47, and we are trying to come to a common denominator on this.
Kweku is coming from a weighted average of perhaps 3 cents or 3 pesos for hydro.
Probably
and
70% hydro at 3 US cents.
So you get a weighted average, which is low.
But even when you do that, our tariff should be double what we get if we do a real weighted average. But it is weighted average.
We've had a very reasonable discussion. What I expect, and I hope you do, Dr. Ahinkra, is that you put clear guidelines for consumers to see what standards they can expect and what they can do about it. And I'm hoping that Kweku would also be able to produce the electricity in ample terms and sustainable basis, because I think I have not mentioned whether the tariff proposals are adequate or whether we should increase tariffs. I think that is obvious. But I think the issues of reliable supply and good quality are very important for all of us in Ghana here today. Thank you both very much for illuminating the subject a little bit more for all of us. And if you've been watching, thank you for watching. If you found it interesting, please let us know. This has been Tarzan's Take. Join us again next week.